policy side of things and handles making standards and approving or disapproving various products, and also issuing the recalls. Provincial governments usually provide the regulatory framework and the guidance for food safety within the province. They usually work with local authorities, like in some jurisdiction, health units, to improve these regulations and ensure food premises can operate in accordance with those regulations. The municipal government can be broken down into different health units or health jurisdictions, depending on where you are in the country. Different ones are tasked with conducting inspections, offering educational programs and resources, or making sure they're offered in the region, and enforcing both provincial and municipal food safety regulations. So they play a critical role in monitoring the food establishments and ensuring that public safety within their jurisdiction. Local boards of health are responsible for the administration of health programs within their jurisdiction. So their primary duty is to ensure that the community health standards are met, consistently maintained. Local boards of health play a critical role in ensuring the well-being of their communities as they oversee the implementation of a wide range of health programs, not just food safety. Through these kinds of efforts, they can help prevent foodborne illnesses and promote community health. So we also have health inspectors working at these agencies, and they're generally tasked with ensuring food safety regulations are followed. Their duties include conducting routine inspections of food premises, responding to food safety related complaints, and taking enforcement actions when violations are found. So your health inspectors play a big role in protecting health through their enforcement action and legislation. And most inspectors across the country are certified by the Canadian Institute of Public Health Inspectors. You'll generally have to have a 4-year university degree and then do your practicum before writing a certification exam, though most will have another degree before going into public health. So they use this education in their work to ensure that food premises kind of stick to the standards and regulations set out by their respective provinces. And we use that education to investigate complaints, monitor compliance, and take corrective action where it's necessary to uphold public hygiene and health. So the inspection process can include scheduled visits to food premises to make sure ongoing compliance is met. If there are any issues identified during these visits, follow-up inspections can be conducted to confirm that corrections have been made. Enforcement actions are usually taken when people aren't complying. We have inspections, which are the cornerstone of the food safety management system. They're conducted at regular basis, usually about 3 times a year for higher risk premises, 2 times for medium risk, and then once a year for things like your corner stores. And through these inspections, you help ensure that premises maintain a higher standard of cleanliness. And then using enforcement actions like fines, closure orders, etc., you can help to make sure people maintain their compliance. When complaints regarding food safety are received, a health inspector can conduct a prompt investigation. If there are any issues uncovered, corrective actions are taken, documented for follow-up purposes. Timely responses to food safety complaints are generally essential to minimize potential health risks and to make sure that things don't go missing and you can collect all the evidence you need to. Inspectors generally take complaints seriously, and they'd like to conduct thorough investigations and to make sure that the corrective actions are taken seriously to avoid any further problems. And then if there is a further problem, it often leads to the foodborne illness investigation that focus on identifying the sources of foodborne illnesses. So they collect and analyze samples to determine the cause and implement control measures to prevent additional cases from coming out. The investigations usually help to control the spread of illnesses and keep the numbers down, as well as narrowing down the potential source. They work with various stakeholders to trace the origin of the illnesses, like the restaurant owners, the transport companies, the producers, to collect and test samples at registered laboratories and implement changes to prevent the recurrence of these kinds of things. Inspectors also, working for the municipality or otherwise, can deliver training programs aimed at food handlers. And they also run public awareness campaigns to promote safe food handling practices. The programs offer guidance and resources to support compliance with food regulations, but also just to make sure that the food is safe. Education and training are essential components of an effective food handling strategy. Inspectors educate the handlers on proper procedures and hygiene practices, promote public awareness, and help you figure out what processes are going to work for you in order to maintain the food safety in your premise. The Health Protection and Promotion Act is the legislation that governs public health in Ontario. It outlines the various responsibilities and powers of the health officials as they relate to food safety and the broader protection of public health. The HPPA provides the legal authority for enforcing food safety regulations. Under this law, public health officials can issue orders, conduct inspections, and take other necessary actions. And there's a concurrent law all across the country, and that all pretty much outlines the same thing. It outlines what inspectors can do, can't do, when they can do it, and gives them all essentially the same powers. So it starts with Section 13, gives inspectors the power to issue health hazard orders when immediate action is needed to address a risk. We saw that during COVID. That was the section that gave inspectors and the medical officer of health the ability to isolate people in order for them to stay home. They're usually helpful in addressing the urgent need for urgent risks that are immediate. So when an inspector identifies a serious risk, they can issue that kind of order to take immediate corrective action, whether it be to isolate, destroy, or just remove that item or individual from the situation. It also gives the right of entry through Section 41. Inspectors have the right to enter a food premise and take any necessary steps to enforce compliance. So they can enter at any reasonable time where business is being conducted in order to conduct their food safety inspections. Underneath those acts, there's usually a regulation. So the food premise regulation in each jurisdiction. In Ontario, it's the Ontario Regulation 493. So these regulations help establish specific standards for the operation of food premises. It covers sanitation, food handling procedures, equipment requirements. They help prevent contamination and ensure everyone is maintaining proper food hygiene. It's laid out in a very specific way to give you specific requirements for each piece of equipment and how it's supposed to be maintained, how it's supposed to be built. We're going to get into a lot of the nitty-gritty, as we go through the course. But just suffice it to say that before going into a food premise or before starting a food premise, you should at least have a look at Regulation 493 or the relevant food premise regulation in your jurisdiction. There's also the food safety protocols that kind of work behind the scenes of the regulation. They kind of act as a best practices document to help guide inspectors and food handlers through the day-to-day operations, and it gives a little bit more context and clarity as to what the regulations mean and how they're supposed to work in reality. So by making these things more clear and giving people more established guidelines, it helps to reduce the risk of foodborne illnesses. So municipal laws and bylaws are generally enacted to complement the provincial regulations and address the food safety issues specific to local communities. The bylaws may address topics like waste management, pest control, water safety, and local bylaws usually are enforced at the community level. So inspectors will enforce these regulations alongside the provincial regulations in order to ensure establishments meet all of the standards. Another good example was the smoking bylaws when they first came out and they were bylaws. Health inspectors would go in and enforce those before we got the bylaw officers involved. So the responsibility to operate your food premise safely rests primarily with the owner and operators as well as the staff. So they have to meet all of the relevant food safety regulations, as well as maintaining a safe sanitary environment for all the patrons and staff. and they have to work to prevent contamination through proactive management and following all the processes that we're going to lay out here in this course. Employees also have some rights. They have the right to work in a safe environment, but they're also responsible for following the proper food handling procedures that are laid out by the management. The employees have to follow the food handling and hygiene practices, and they also have to follow the occupational health and safety rules laid out by their. So, food safety in Ontario is usually governed by a multi-tiered system involving federal, provincial, and municipal authorities. So, public health inspectors and local boards of health are central to the enforcement of food safety regulations, conducting inspections, responding to complaints, and educating stakeholders. Some key legislative tools like the HPPA food premise regulations provide the framework for the work that they do. So, understanding and following the food safety regulations can be essential in preventing foodborne illnesses and ensuring the public's health. Food premise owners, operators, and employees all play a role in maintaining safe food environments. Through cooperation and compliance with regulations, we can all set a high standards of food safety across all levels of food service.